math dealer here, and we're going to deal out some values about that unit circle. Yes, the great and wonderful unit circle that so many of us math people have to remember. Okay, so pi over 6, right? We've heard of him. Pi over 3, yep, he's a good guy. Pi over 4, yep, absolutely. Know him, definitely. Pi over 2, and of course, you know, your 0 and all those other great guys. But honestly, these numbers are the key. All right, definitely the key to it. And also, the unit circle is the key. Okay, so very bad circle, but just go with me here. All right, so oftentimes we hear about pi over 6, right? And pi over 6 is a 30-degree angle. I always tell my students the easiest way to kind of go from radians to degrees is just think about, okay, 6 goes into 180 because 180 degrees is kind of the money, right? 6 into 180 is 30, so my reference angle for anything over 6, as long as it's in the simplest form, any pi over 6, as long as it's in the simplest form, has a reference angle of 30 degrees. And then, of course, you've got the next angle, pi over 4. Pi over 4 is coming out there, right? Pi over 4, which is our 45 degrees. And if you think about that, yep, take 4 into 180, Merry Christmas, you get 45 degrees. Very cool, right? We got this. Then our next one, let's go with green on this guy, right? Pi over 3. Pi over 3 is my 60-degree angle, right? Pi over 3. Because, oh, by the way, 3 into 180, yep, he's a 60. All right, so that's one thing we can definitely remember. And then, of course, your pi over 2, he's sitting at the top. He's like, look how cool I am. I'm way up here. And, of course, 2 into 180, Merry Christmas, you get a 90-degree. And that, of course, came from the fact that when the axes intersect, of course, they intersect at 90 degrees. So we get that, all right? So he's like, yeah, I got that. Well, what about the other stuff, there, math dealer? So remember your ordered pairs. Your ordered pairs. The first coordinate always refers to that cosine, and the second coordinate refers to the sine, right? That's kind of what we always talked about. I used to always remember the way that worked was that if you think about it, C comes before S in the alphabet, right? It's just like X comes before Y in the alphabet. So my cosine corresponds with my X coordinate, my sine corresponds with my Y coordinate. All right, so those are the ones we're kind of thinking of. So we got to walk around this entire circle thinking about those ordered pairs. Well, I always tell my students, let me tell you something. Pi over 4 is your money. That's your radical 2 over 2. You just kind of have to know that one. And yeah, there's a way I could prove it to you, but just get down into your head, right? Just put it into that head of yours. That radical 2 over 2 always works with that 45 degree, always works with the 4. The other ones that we keep mixing up is the 1/2 and the radical 3s over 2s, right? Well, if you think about this, if I'm getting to this ordered pair, right, if I'm getting to this point right there with that pi over 6, I am taking a long way on my x, but a short way on my y. Well, a long way on my x is going to get me radical 3 over 2. A short way on my y, well, that's my 1/2. The flip of that, talk to me about this pi over 3 way up here. That's 60 degree. And I know I got a little sloppy up here. I apologize. Let's clean up a little bit. All right. So this ordered pair is sitting up here. Well, this guy, to get to this point, it's a short way on the x, right? Let's go orange that way, right? It's just a short way on the x. So that gets to 1/2 and a long way on the y. Well, that's my radical 3 over 2. All right, now, if I'm sitting on the unit circle, that's a no-brainer. The x-coordinate is 1, the y didn't go up at all. And then, of course, when you're up here, your x didn't go anywhere, but your y surely went up 1. Then, of course, all these points just get reflected around the unit circle. And it really is that simple, although, of course, it looks like I just made a mess. But, hey, that's really what we're looking at. So let's get a nice clean sheet. So if I said to you, all right, let's talk about the 2 pi over 3, okay, 2 pi over 3. And let's say you want to know the cosine and the sine of 2 pi over 3. Well, you think about it. Pi over 3, right? You see that 3. We're dealing with a reference angle of 60 degrees, okay? That's a short on the x and a long on the y, right? Because to get up to 60 degrees, no matter how you're going to do it from a reference angle, you got to go over and then up high. Right? 60 degrees is a big one. So you know the x-coordinate deals something with the 1/2, and the y-coordinate is the radical 3 over 2. Now you just have to figure out what quadrant you're in so you can figure out what sign you're dealing with. Okay, well, 2 pi over 3, that is 2/3 of a pi, right? 2/3 of a pi. Well, on our unit circle, a pi is 180, right? We know pi is 180 degrees. So if I'm only going 2/3 of it, well, I'm in quadrant 2. And way back in Algebra 1, you learned in quadrant 2, your x's are negative and your y's are positive. So that gives me an ordered pair of negative 1/2, comma, positive radical 3 over 2. There's your cosine of 2 pi over 3. And Merry Christmas, there's the sine of 2 pi over 3. You feel me? Good. Awesome. All right. So I'm hoping that that does make a little bit of sense now, and that you can walk around anything on the unit circle. So let's say you were like 7 pi over 3, right? 7 pi over 3. And they're like, what's the cosine? What's the sine? Well, if you think about that, that's like pi over 3, right? It's in simplest form, so we're good. So I'm dealing with a 60-degree reference angle, right? Oh, did the same one over there. That's cool. Anyway, so I'm dealing with a 60-degree reference angle. So I know I got to figure out, okay, what quadrant am I in? Because I know 60 degrees is short on the x, long on the y, right? Well, if I'm 7/3 pi, that's 2 1/3 pi. So that's 2 pi and 1/3 of pi. Well, 2 pi, that's one trip, right? So that's basically taking me wee and then back. And then 1/3 of a pi, well, that's just a good old 60-degree pop-up. So basically, the cosine is going to be 1/2, and the sine is radical 3 over 2. So anything is going to work like that. So if I said 5 pi over 6, let's go with that one, right? So pi over 6, right? 6. What's my reference angle? Basically, take 180, divide it by 6, you get 30 degrees. There's my reference angle. So if you think about a reference angle of 30 degrees, that's long on the long on the x, short on the y. So if the ordered pair there is long on the x, short on the y. Now you just have to figure out what quadrant. So the question is, okay, well, what quadrant are you in? Well, if you're a 5/6 of a pi, you're not quite a pi. You're only 5/6 of it. So you're sitting in quadrant 2, because remember, a whole pi is a semicircle. 5/6 of a pi, not quite there. So my reference angle is in quadrant 2, and it is 30 degrees, like we talked about. So that's going to put my cosine, since it's quadrant 2, is going to be negative radical 3 over 2, and my sine is going to be 1/2. So the sine of 5 pi over 6 is positive 1/2, and the cosine of 5 pi over 6 is negative radical 3 over 2. So those signs, positives and negatives, go with whichever quadrant you're in. And that's why you always hear them say, all, right, students take calculus, right? And you say, well, what does that mean to me? Well, cosine is positive in quadrant 4. All of them are positive in quadrant 1. Quadrant 2, only the sine is positive and the cosine is negative. And in quadrant 3, they're both negative, so the tangent is the only thing positive. And that's why they will say all, meaning all of them are positive here. Students, there's only the sine positive there. Take, only the tangent's positive there. Calculus, and only the cosine is positive there. So that's one way you can kind of remember what the signs are. But if you're this far and you're sitting in trigonometry or pre-cal or college math, you know your ordered pairs. That's a no-brainer. So you got that part. Now it's just a matter of figuring out, okay, what's my reference angle, and then what quadrant am I in? And that really sums it up, okay? Just never, 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 never forget, all right? If we have something over 4, we are talking about a 45-degree reference angle, because 4 into 180, of course, is 45. It's not like you don't know that. And you'd be looking at the radical 2 over 2 and the radical 2 over 2. 7 pi over 4 is 1 3/4 pi. So that means I've gone 1 pi. And then 3/4 of a pi, good golly, that's almost back to pi, right? So 3/4 of a pi, this part right here, is going to put you in quadrant 4. Well, wait a minute. If I'm in quadrant 4, my cosine is positive and my sine is negative because my y values are negative in quadrant 4 and my x values are positive in quadrant 4. And that's why the cosine is radical 2 over 2 and the sine is negative radical 2 over 2. All right? Cool beans. All right, so that's just a quick way of learning the sine and cosine. All righty, and I hope this helped. And that's the Math Dealer signing off. Enjoy the rest of your day.